Jason.
So can you plate for us, I guess, the topics for discussion so we can use our time more efficiently in terms of what we're looking at with the charter, broad brush, and then we can get down nitty-gritty?
Sure. Under tab 6 is the charter. There are two versions. The one with the original watermark, it's behind the one that's in front, is the current charter. These have to be structured a certain way, and, you know, we're obviously going to follow that. But that's the one that's standing now, that pretty much is the same charter from when this committee was first stood up. What we are proposing is labeled discussion draft and dated April 30th. And very broadly, let me just pull it out so I can sit them side by side. We have added a little bit of clarity and amplified a bit the statement of purpose. The authorities have not changed, so we can ignore that. That's, you know, our lawyers keeping us all out of jail and in operations consistent with federal law. Functions, we've made, again, some tweaks to functions, but, you know, that is a place where the committee's had a number of discussions in the past. And then structure, 11 members. We don't right now have any anticipation of any authority to change that number. Remembering, though, if we need a special expert, if, you know, we can invite in speakers, we can stay engaged with people as we need to. That has a different, you know, it doesn't obligate funds like it does having another advisory committee member. But again, if there's some need to discuss 11, that can be done. We did get, I believe, some public comments on that note. Ex officio members, we have added ARC, but there have been other discussions. There's at least one recommendation that does suggest other ex officio members. 4-year terms are still here. Vacancies, the secretary being able to appoint a vacancy within 90 days. You know, that, again, that's the old process. We'd still like to see that be 90 days. It's this vetting process that's taking about 120 to 140 days. But, you know, I think if we let that target slide, I'm not willing to do that. We try to keep that at 90. The language around ad hoc subcommittees is pretty much the same. Some of these things we've just changed, you know, a word here or there. It doesn't change the intent. Meetings, not more than 2 times a year. The original Chronic Fatigue Syndrome Coordinating Committee, way back when it alternated between NIH and CDC, met for 1 day per meeting 4 times a year. The committee structure, and it's the charter that drives the structure and drives the budget and so forth, is structured around 2 times a year meetings. Conference calls cost almost nothing to set up for the subcommittee, so, you know, those are not considered a significant effort there. So, you know, 4 one-day meetings, 2 two-day meetings. That shift to 2 two-day meetings was made when this was made the HHS, OPHS-led advisory committee. Open meetings, obviously required. Compensation, again, that's consistent with the Federal Advisory Committee Act. The cost estimate, I said earlier $135,000. Don't ask me where I invented $5,000 more. The number reported here is what's reported on the website, $130,000. And reports, who we report to, again, no changes. At termination date, we can charter committees for 2 years. All charters are up for renewal every 2 years.
Chris? So Jason, it seemed to me that pretty much the one significant change would be adding ARC as ex officio. There was a lot of public comment that I read in advance of the meeting regarding the patient community looking for meetings more often than twice a year. So I don't know if that's a topic that we can open up for discussion. Obviously, it's driven by budgetary issues. I think when I first came on the committee, it was actually 4 times a year for 1 day. I can understand why you do 2-day meetings for purposes of transportation and expense, but I think it would be a good idea to address it, at least for the public, because I know there was a real lot of comment about that focused issue with regard to the charter issues.
Chris, my only concern is kind of a time issue right now. We have, if I got it right, about 10 or 15 minutes before lunch. There's certainly lots of material here that has to be digested, thought about. The one that Jason brings up, certainly an important one. I'm concerned that we've got a lunch that basically has 2 subcommittees potentially meeting, and I have no idea who's on the 2 subcommittees.
Right.
So if it's possible for us to spend some time first finding out who's going to go to each of those subcommittees for those lunches, where those groups can then start going through this material, I'd feel particularly more comfortable if I knew, for example, who's on my research subcommittee. And also, I think the discussion about that second subcommittee, it just didn't seem like it got finalized as to exactly what it is. So if that could help me find out who's on it, who's the chair of it, and maybe, because I think we need to have a chair of that other subcommittee, and maybe even a chair-elect, because, my term will be ending over the next year. Possibly the other person, I think we need to have a chair-elect, but that's maybe structural. That just needs to, I'd be more interested in some of the structural issues right now in our very short time we have before lunch to deal with.
Yeah, we're running out of time again, aren't we, Lenny? So procedural. For today, are people accepting of the 2-committee substructure? Yeah, and see how it works. And if it doesn't seem as if it's going to work, then we'll need to revisit that.
Can we straw poll? Just see who's the new members, where they're interested in going, and get a sense.
So current members of the research committee are Lenny Jason, Ron Glazer, and Art. Yeah. So who of the new members thinks that they would like to be on the research committee? So that's 1, 2, 3 new members. Okay. So.
Just to mention that the 3 older members, not in age, but whatever, are actually circulating off after the fall meeting.
Right.
So that's why it's really critical. I mean, if things stay by the current terms we have, that we have a chair-elect for that committee who starts, assuming some responsibilities as soon as possible.
First order of business before you take a mouthful, Lenny.